My ex invited me to his fancy wedding just to brag about his rich fiancée, but when I arrived with my handsome billionaire plus one, the whole event turned into his worst nightmare. My ex-partner invited me to his wedding, seemingly to parade his affluent fiancée, but my unexpected guest turned the event on its head in a spectacular fashion. I'm 22 years old and met Dylan, who is 30, when we both worked part-time at Starbucks. At the time, Dylan was working to pay off student loans, and I was still in college, saving up to move out of my parents' house for good due to their significant gambling debts. His parents were also unable to provide for him because of their financial troubles. We initially connected over discussions about our families, but we eventually realized we simply enjoyed each other's company. 2 years later, I graduated and had saved enough to live independently. Dylan, however, hadn't been able to move out of his parents' home, still struggling with student loan debt. I invited him to live with me, but he couldn't even afford his share of the rent due to his existing debts. I offered to pay 80% of the rent, and he would cover the remaining 20%, which he readily accepted. We split utility costs equally, separate from the rent. Dylan and I worked at different companies. I had a corporate job with a flexible schedule, while his role was hands-on and demanded long hours on site. My supervisor didn't mind if I worked from home, as long as I met my objectives. Dylan's demanding work schedule often prevented him from helping around the house. Consequently, I handled the cleaning, cooking, laundry, and dishes. Knowing how tough his job was, I didn't mind managing most of the household chores. However, since he was always the last to eat, I did ask him to take out the trash. Sadly, Dylan would consistently forget, leaving me to carry out the garbage every morning before I left for work. One weekend, I returned home to absolute chaos. Empty food wrappers, chocolate foils, and unwashed dishes cluttered the kitchen counter. The trash hadn't been removed, and laundry had piled up. I just wanted to relax after a long day, but the mess was unbearable. Hoping Dylan would notice and appreciate my efforts, I spent the entire evening cleaning. When he arrived home, he greeted me warmly and said he missed me, but he didn't seem to notice the change in the house. Instead, he immediately sat down to watch his game, leaving me feeling disheartened and unappreciated. For the first time, I started to cry, truly realizing how little he valued me. "Is something wrong?" Dylan asked, looking back. I shook my head, pretending everything was fine, and told him I was ready for bed. Before going upstairs, I reminded him again to take out the garbage. He nodded in response. As expected, the trash was still there the next morning. I became furious when Dylan asked me for breakfast as he entered the kitchen. I told him if he wanted to eat, he could prepare his own food. I completely lost my temper when he accused me of being impolite, screaming that he was useless around the house. He blinked as if he'd done nothing wrong, urging me not to be so dramatic. Taking a deep breath, I asked him why he never took out the trash. "I forgot," he replied casually. Then I asked him what he actually contributed around the house beyond coming home, drinking beer, and watching TV. He began by saying he deserved some downtime because he was constantly exhausted after work. Agreeing and nodding, I then asked, "And what about me?" I reminded him that I cleaned the house, cooked for both of us, did the laundry, and even ironed his shirts for the week after I got home from work. All I asked was for him to take out the trash. Dylan dismissed me, claiming he never asked me to do any of those things. He went on to say his job was truly difficult and that as his girlfriend, I should be understanding and supportive. He even tried to defend his stance by saying his mother had always treated his father the same way. Hearing this enraged me. I realized I was letting him take advantage of me, even though we weren't even married, despite all the effort I put into keeping the house in order. I looked him directly in the eye and told him I would no longer be helping him around the house. We were supposed to be equals, and I wasn't his mother. I told him he needed to prepare his own meals, clean up after himself, do his own laundry, iron his own clothes, and take out the trash. His eyes widened, and he started to object, but I stopped him with a raised hand. I also told him he had to pay half the rent or leave. "Where is this coming from?" Dylan questioned, incredulous. I explained that I was tired of putting in so much effort for him and feeling unappreciated. I left the house, running late for work, but he still seemed to want to argue. I had never set such firm boundaries in my life, and I felt no remorse. I followed through on my promise to only clean up after myself. It was strangely satisfying to watch him fumble around the house trying to find clean clothes or iron his shirts before work. He didn't take out the garbage or wash dishes, thinking I'd do it for him later, but I refused. I chose to eat from takeout containers so I could easily dispose of my trash without going into the kitchen. When the dishes started to pile up and the smell became unbearable, Dylan tried multiple times to talk to me, urging me to be a good partner and take care of him, but I remained firm and unyielding. When it was time to pay the rent, I informed the landlord that Dylan would cover the other half and gave her my 50% upfront. He was furious when he got home, yelling at me to keep paying the same 80%. I calmly reminded him that he never showed gratitude when I did, and I firmly refused. I was done helping him. Despite his best attempts to make excuses, he was eventually forced to give the landlord his portion of the rent. He never once expressed regret to me throughout this entire ordeal. He never took the time to acknowledge his errors or show remorse for not appreciating the housework I had done. It was truly disappointing. In retrospect, I wish I had recognized his true character sooner. Our arguments worsened over the next few months, with Dylan blaming me for everything and trying to manipulate me into returning to my previous behavior. My promotion at work seemed to be the final straw for Dylan. He must have heard about it from one of our mutual friends who happened to be my coworker, because that night we had the most intense argument of our relationship. After getting home intoxicated, Dylan woke me up, saying he needed to speak with me. Since he was clearly drunk from celebrating with my friends that evening, I suggested we talk tomorrow. I was so sleepy and annoyed that I sat up in bed and asked him what was so important that he had to wake me up in the middle of the night, but he insisted it was vital. Dylan then admitted, while intoxicated, that he had met someone at work. I immediately realized he was referring to Bella. He had brought me along to one of his office parties where I had seen her. Bella was 25, clearly quite wealthy, and the daughter of an industrialist. The only reason she worked was her father's insistence that she gain work experience. Dylan continued by saying he was falling for her because, in his opinion, she was a real woman, unlike me. I honestly didn't care, so I stared at him, feeling nothing. We were essentially just roommates at this point, and I knew our relationship had been deteriorating for months. He went on to discuss his feelings for Bella, but I interrupted him mid-sentence. I told Dylan that I was happy for him and didn't care if he was dating someone else. I recommended we end our relationship amicably and that he vacate our home right away. Dylan seemed shocked, asking if I was envious of Bella. I shook my head and grinned, telling him I was genuinely relieved he had met someone else, so I wouldn't feel bad about ending our relationship. Anger flushed Dylan's face. He claimed my promotion had made me more self-assured. I calmly told him our connection had nothing to do with my advancement. I had simply come to the conclusion over the past few months that we were no longer compatible. I clarified that I could understand his desire to see someone else because we had evolved into more of a roommate than a romantic partner. Dylan started yelling, which surprised me because I assumed he would be relieved. He claimed to despise modern women who show off their careers, like me. He said Bella was a much better woman because all she wanted was to marry and have kids. Despite his yelling, I remained composed and reminded him that every woman had different requirements. I loved my job, but Bella might not care as much about it because she comes from a wealthy household. I advised him to be with Bella if he desired someone similar to her. I reaffirmed that we should stop arguing and that he was free to leave our home whenever he wanted. With wide eyes, he inquired about my ability to pay the rent. I clarified that I could now pay the full rent on my own without roommates because I had received a raise. He started yelling at me after hearing this, accusing me of trying to brag in front of him. He continued by saying Bella was wealthier than I was and even owned a home her father had purchased for her. He insisted that I become more complacent and change who I was. Then he scoffed, stating that men ultimately desired a housewife rather than a woman who could make more money than they could. I was sick of arguing with him in the middle of the night, so I finally begged him to stop talking. I informed him that he could sleep on the couch until the end of the month, after which he would have to move out. Even though I could still hear him complaining, I chose to ignore him and resumed my slumber. Thankfully, Dylan began packing and gradually removing his belongings during the course of the week. As I considered the possibility of eventually having the entire property to myself, I began to feel excited. When I returned home last night, I was startled to see Dylan and Bella seated on our couch. I gave him a questioning glance, and he told me he wanted to show Bella his apartment because it was his last night there. Knowing I would return, I found it incomprehensible that he would bring another woman into our home without my permission. I greeted Bella pleasantly because I didn't want to be impolite, and I believed this wasn't her fault. I was shocked to see how disdainfully she regarded me and didn't even acknowledge me. I went to freshen up, not wanting to take anything personally. Later, Bella came to fetch some water while I was in the kitchen making spaghetti for myself. I felt uncomfortable for a minute as she stood there observing me. She looked at me with the same disdain as before when I inquired if she wanted anything. I chose to ignore her and carried on preparing my meal with the intention of eating it quietly in my room. I was about to head downstairs after eating when I heard Bella and Dylan conversing. Bella was telling Dylan how fortunate he was to have upgraded himself after dating someone who looked like me. Dylan laughed and agreed with her, and I froze in disbelief. When Bella questioned him about why he had ever fallen in love with me, Dylan replied with something that broke my heart. Because I was naive enough to lend him money during college and pay for our dates. He admitted that he had taken advantage of me. He disclosed that he had been able to save a significant amount of money because I had been paying over half the rent for the previous 2 years. I was shocked by what I had just heard. I had assumed that he might have taken advantage of my kindness to pay over half his rent, but I was unaware that he had been manipulating me from the start. Bella and Dylan persisted in discussing our connection and mocking me in every way they could. I was on the verge of crying out of embarrassment, but I didn't want them to see me that way. I went back upstairs quietly and sobbed into my pillow for the remainder of the night. When I woke up the following morning, Bella and Dylan had left. He had formally moved out after gathering his belongings. I finally realized I was free of him, and I wandered around the home in a daze. The sense of relief I experienced upon realizing that he was finally no longer in my house or in my life is beyond words. I danced around the house and shed happy tears. After that, I started to clean the entire place to remove all traces of him. I really appreciated being independent throughout the course of the following few weeks. What Bella and Dylan had said about me no longer mattered to me. Everything was fine until 2 months later when a mutual friend told me at work that Dylan and Bella were getting married. It all seemed too abrupt, and I was surprised when our friend showed me their engagement photos. They looked like a happy couple. I acknowledged that I would never have been content with Dylan anyway, but I also felt a twinge of regret for how he had taken advantage of me throughout the years. I was thus thrilled that he had discovered someone who could bring him joy. When I returned home that evening and looked in my mailbox, I discovered an unexpected wedding invitation. My eyes widened in surprise when I recognized that it was from Dylan and Bella until I opened the invitation and noticed something scribbled in the corner. I initially believed it might have been an error or that he had invited me out of courtesy. "I want you to attend my wedding so you can see the grand life I'm going to have with Bella," was written inside the card. Slowly, it dawned on me that he had asked me just to flaunt his newfound fortune, his marriage, and his wealthy spouse. I inhaled deeply as I tried to figure out why he would invite me in this way, given that all I had done over the years was look after him. My pent-up rage and resentment from all the years started to explode. I realized I had to be petty with him. With a +1, I replied yes. I was determined to make Dylan regret ever inviting me, and I had a scheme in the works. After turning on my laptop, I started looking through Bella's social media accounts. I looked at every photo she had ever uploaded. Fortunately, I was able to locate what I was searching for. Bella and her ex-boyfriend, Jake, had broken up just 6 months prior. They had obviously been dating for a very long time because she had multiple postings with him, and their photos went all the way back to high school. Jake accepted my friend request from my profile, and I messaged him after he said yes. I was shocked when he answered, and we struck up a conversation. I informed him that I was Dylan's ex, and that I intended to invite him as a guest at their wedding. I told Jake everything, since he appeared interested and wanted to know why I was contacting him. Jake talked candidly about Bella's repeated infidelity throughout the course of the following few weeks. I was unaware that she had recently had an affair with Dylan. He went on to disclose Bella's constant attraction to older men. He wasn't overly shocked, therefore, when she confessed her love for Dylan while they were still dating. They broke up fairly badly, as you may guess, and even though she told Jake they should stay friends, he blocked her everywhere. He looked to still be in love with Bella based on the way he spoke about her. I also shared with Jake my own story of Dylan's abuse of me throughout the years. I opened up to him about everything that Dylan had done to me and how Bella and Dylan had teased me. When Jake learned how Dylan had spoken about me and treated me, he was horrified. Jake listened to everything and eventually consented to come with me. I became excited when I imagined how my ex and Bella would have looked when they spotted me at their wedding with Jake. As anticipated, Dylan's eyes widened as he saw me entering with my special guest on the wedding day. He must have known right away that Jake was Bella's ex. We pretended to locate our assigned seats, ignoring his expression. I just grinned when Dylan approached me and muttered angrily, "Why are you here with Bella's ex?" He had to reluctantly make his way back up the aisle, giving me a fierce look because he couldn't cause a disturbance in front of everyone. Everyone got up from their chairs when the bride was ready to make her entrance. With her father by her side, Bella looked lovely in her white floor-length gown as she made her way down the aisle. Following a flawless ceremony, the festivities moved to the reception area. She must have gone to change, as she was wearing a different dress when she arrived at the reception. Jake and I had not yet caught Bella's attention. She stopped dead in her steps when she noticed Jake sitting next to me. Maybe still perplexed, Bella glanced at me and then at him. "What are you doing with me?" she asked Jake, grinning. I informed her that I had asked him to join us as a guest in order to support her marriage. She asked Jake whether we were dating now, looking furious. Bella's cheeks flushed with rage, but Jake said nothing since this was an absurd question to ask in the first place. She gave me a sour look and nodded seriously when Jake asked if he could talk to her quietly, since he didn't want her to make a scene. After they left, I turned to see Dylan hawkishly observing our exchange. Dylan appeared worried, but he was powerless to do anything but sit there and act as though nothing was wrong. The celebration went on, and everyone appeared to be having a good time, but an hour had gone by, and the bride was nowhere to be seen. A few patrons began to take note and murmur to one another. When Bella's father became worried, he asked one of the bridesmaids to go see how she was doing. The bridesmaid ran up with a message in her hands a minute later. In front of everyone, she declared that Bella and her ex-boyfriend had fled. Everyone was stunned as they stood there. The bridesmaid went on to read the note in which Bella acknowledged that she had made a grave mistake by marrying Dylan and that meeting Jake had rekindled all of her old emotions. Dylan stood there looking vulnerable and ashamed as the visitors were further taken aback by the revelation. I was really astonished too. Even though I had brought Jake along to annoy Dylan, I never would have thought that things would end out this way. Dylan appeared as though he was prepared to rip someone's head off. Bella's parents really apologized for what had transpired and asked everyone to leave. I saw Dylan, who had once been arrogant and pompous, stand there by himself, utterly shocked by Bella's choice. Even though I feel a little bad about the wedding, I'm also relieved that Dylan's attempt to make me look bad didn't work out so well. The day that was supposed to demonstrate his victory over me had turned into the scene of his demise. Am I the jerk for spoiling my ex's wedding by bringing a special guest? Ever since I share my tale, I've been getting conflicting responses. Some of you believe I went a bit too far, but many of you concur that I made the correct decision. I should make it clear that I never intended to ruin my ex's wedding and that I never mentioned it to Jake. I don't know what private conversations Bella and Jake had that led Bella to abruptly call off the wedding. Since my ex had asked me in the first place to flaunt his marriage to a wealthy woman like Bella, I just wanted to be spiteful with him. Bella's decision to end her marriage was entirely independent of me. I've texted Jake to ask him what happened, and I'll provide an update as soon as he responds. Second update. Jake contacted me in a lengthy text message that he gave me yesterday. He essentially expressed his gratitude for my taking him to the wedding. He informed me of his and Bella's honeymoon, which she was scheduled to have with Dylan. Her parents, who were quite concerned about her, had also been consulted. He told me that he'll be seeing me shortly to personally explain everything. Dylan, meanwhile, had been contacting me constantly since the wedding. He blamed me for ending his marriage in a series of hostile text messages and phone calls. I never responded to him, and I had no desire to converse with him. I was aware that I had nothing to do with Bella and Jake's joint escape. Dylan chose to arrive at my house today, as he knew I would be home during the weekend. I initially requested him to go and wouldn't open the door. He insisted that he wouldn't go until he spoke with me. He could say anything he wanted to me standing outside my house, since I warned him he wasn't let inside. By opening the door a bit, Dylan began screaming at me, accusing me of ruining his life. He had apparently given notice at work, believing that after marrying someone as wealthy as Bella, he would never have to return. I brought Jake to their wedding, and he questioned me angrily. Why did I decide to tell him that I had overheard all he said to Bella that evening? Because I was becoming mad at him for blaming me when I told him that I knew he had been using me to pay for our dates and his rent for all the years we dated. His eyes widened in surprise. He obviously didn't respect me, even though I assured him that I did all those things because I loved him. I also reminded him that I never bothered to become involved in his relationship and that I didn't care that much when he cheated on me with Bella. I was pushed over the brink, though, when he invited me to their wedding and wanted to show me the life he would lead with his wealthy spouse. I informed him that he had no right to visit my home and scold me for something that wasn't my fault. He should be upset with Bella because she was an adult and made the decision to leave him. Dylan began to scream back that I shouldn't punish him for the past and that it wasn't his fault that I was so innocent that I didn't realize how he had been taking advantage of me for so long. As he went on to rave about how Bella was meant to transform his life and how he could have had everything he ever desired, I laughed at what he was saying. He disclosed that I had ruined his opportunity to flirt and woo Bella, despite his best efforts. I didn't want to listen to his statements any longer because they were so vile. At this point, I threatened to call the police if he didn't leave my property. I pulled out my phone and dialed in front of him after he told me I would never dare to do that. As he was departing, he told me not to overreact and instantly retreated a few steps. I vowed to myself that this would be the last time I saw him before I closed the door. I have now told my family about the incident and blocked him everywhere. In order to document his actions and lodge a formal complaint against him in the event that he returns, I intend to install a camera on my door and change the locks on my property. Update 3. I haven't provided an update in a month. I didn't have time to respond to everyone who has been messaging me to inquire about whether Jake and I had ever met because I've been so busy at work. I'm glad to say that we did meet last week. Jake said he was ready to chat and invited me to lunch. Bella was seated behind him when I arrived at the location. I thought Bella was coming to pick a fight with me, so I instantly braced myself. To my amazement, though, she greeted me with a warm grin and a kind word when she spotted me. Jake reassured me that she was merely there to apologize, even if I wasn't really sure why she was there. Bella nodded and truly apologized for her previous words toward me. She continued by telling Dylan her story. She disclosed that she would constantly receive a lot of attention and kindness from Dylan at work. They spent a lot of time together due to their hectic work schedules, and Dylan would often gripe about me and our relationship. He would express his dissatisfaction and his wish that he had a woman as attractive as Bella. She acknowledged that every time he gave her a compliment, she felt gratified and began to feel sorry for him. She got overly passionate and even slept with Dylan during a difficult time when she and Jake were going through a difficult period. Dylan then persuaded her to end their relationship by claiming that Jake wasn't suitable for her. Dylan kept messaging her, telling her that she was ideal for him and that they could live together. She eventually ended her relationship with Jake because she felt bad about cheating on him and she believed that she could be content with Dylan, even if they were different in age. Bella went on to describe how seeing me made her feel uneasy. She acknowledged that she coveted my independence and the fact that I didn't actually require a partner to look after me. She expressed regret for offending me. I explained to her how hard I had worked my entire life to get to where I am now at work and that I could understand her perspective. Her eyes were downcast as she nodded seriously. After that, I asked her to describe what had transpired at her wedding to Dylan. She admitted that she was taken aback to see Jake when I took him to the wedding. She had never felt the same way about Dylan until she saw his face and understood how much she still loved him. Jake told me that they discovered they still loved each other after they talked about their sentiments in private at the wedding. Bella left a note for her family, so they made the decision to flee together. They were deeply in love and had been together since that day. Bella told me that she discussed this with her parents. They were furious at first, but in the end, they chose to stand by her. Additionally, she disclosed that she intended to apply for an annulment with Dylan shortly. Even though I wasn't totally comfortable hearing this, I was glad that at least two people were content following the terrible occurrences. I could tell Bella and Jake were beaming at one another. After eating lunch and continuing our conversation, we finally said our goodbyes. I haven't spoken to either of them much since that conversation and don't want to be involved in their drama. I intend to continue working hard at my profession and concentrating on myself. I'm not sure what Dylan's future holds, but I hope he can eventually grow from his mistakes and refrain from pursuing partners for financial gain. Thank you for watching. If you haven't subscribed yet, please do so and hit the notification bell to stay updated with more shocking real-life stories happening around you.